to spread.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I hope, Pastor, I know some of the names you might not recognize. So I said, I hope you let him in the meeting.
No, no, it's open. I said it's open for everybody.
Right. So, and then um, I told everybody that we usually start at 6:45. So,
Right. Well,
um,
no, our platform is open for everybody. So, and I
okay.
know that what you're going to talk to us about today is needed so very much. And in lieu of all the stuff that's happening, we want to get as much information and those that we consider to be, knowledgeable or expert in that situation to happen. So, you know, um, I'm going to go ahead and pray, unless you want to do that, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Um, I guess I can pray.
Okay, go right
That
ahead.
way you can get a full rest this Bible study.
All right, thank you, Jesus.
Relax. You don't have to pray. So I'll pray. Lord, we just thank you for today. We thank you for this hour. We thank you, Lord, for the body of Christ and letting our light shine before men that they may see our good works and glorify you. We thank you for just wisdom and knowledge and helping us to be good stewards as we function in this world, Lord God, and ultimately bring you glory and honor by our actions. And just, Father, we just thank you for your blessings, and we just thank you for your mercy and your grace and your love, and just bless the ears of the people who are on the video. And Lord God, even those who are not able to attend, Father, we just thank you for your love and your grace and your mercy. And help me to decrease while you increase. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear me. And so we want to thank everybody for being on the call. And the thing that I wanted to kind of reiterate is that we're living in, as you all know, very different times. We're living in times that are kind of foreign to us. None of us have lived through a worldwide virus or pandemic, and none of us has seen just the whole economy just shut down. And um, um, we have to kind of navigate through all of this and try to get through it. And so I think too, when you look at the church and Christians in general, we live in a wealthy nation, so we are used to nice homes, nice cars. We're used to having food in our refrigerators. We're used to all those things, and but the majority of the world doesn't live like that. So I think some people are saying, well, is this judgment? Is God actually judging the world? Is this what is this God judging America? So I don't know all of that. God is actually judging us or anything. I do believe that He is prepping us for um, for uh, for the future. So I do think that God is actually shaking people up, and while we're quarantined in the house, it'll allow you to slow down and really focus on the things that really matter. So your family, spending more time in prayer, spending more time in Bible study, and also too, it's a good time because many of us actually are thinking about others. So we're actually reaching out to people who normally we wouldn't maybe text or call. I've gotten a lot of calls and texts of people checking in, saying, "Hey, you all right? Is everything going good in your household?" And everybody that you talk to is asking about you and your family and how you're doing. So this is, this is actually causing people in general, I think, to be more selfless and to look upon the needs of others. So So we got to really be prayerful, especially for the families that have lost loved ones or who have loved ones, in the hospital, and struggling with this virus. But what I wanted to really talk about is just how we should be, what our mental state should be, and our physical state and our spiritual state should be, in these times that we're living in. And if anybody has a question or a comment, feel free to unmute yourself and pop in, and then we'll be happy to hear your comment or question. First, I wanted to read from Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. And this is the Apostle Paul, and he's talking to the church at Philippi. And he mentioned that, he says, this is Philippians 4, verse 10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again, wherein ye also careful, but ye lacked opportunity. So this was a church that it sounded like they were going through some financial issues. They wanted to be able to be a blessing to Paul and his ministry, maybe help him out with some of the costs that he was incurring in his ministry, but they just didn't have the funds. They lacked the opportunity, like he said. Then he says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am herewith to be content. So what Paul is saying, that no matter what state I'm going to rejoice, I'm going to be content. He says, I know how to be abased, I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I am instructed to be full and to be hungry, to both abound and suffer need. So he says, I know how to live when things are good, when I'm getting raises, when I'm getting bonuses and promotions. And also I know how to live when I'm hungry, when I get a cut in pay, when I get laid off, when I'm furloughed, so I'm using some up-to-date terms here. So he's basically saying, I have the ability to obviously be flexible. I'm not depending upon this world system. He says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. So we like to quote that last verse all the time, but we don't look at the verses, preceding that, where Paul says that, I know how to live when things are tight. I know how to live when things are abundant. And so what he's really saying is we should not be tied to this world. We should not be locked into this world system where we're just totally dependent upon it. And, some of the things I'm going to talk about, you've heard me talk about before, because there are principles that don't change. There are principles that continue on, and because they are from God, and God is eternal. He doesn't change. So I think that's something that we need to know and understand, that we need to be prepared in these last days we're in. Things aren't going to be always as they were. Things are going to change, but it's going to be an opportunity for the church to shine, because instead of us panicking like the world is, we have a peace about us, and people are going to wonder why we're so peaceful, why we're not panicking, why we're not getting excited. How can we continue to rejoice and praise God? And they're going to know that we love each other, that we are Jesus's disciples by the way we love one another. So they're going to see us feeding the hungry, clothing people, praying for people, and out doing good. So in this pandemic, I think it is an opportunity for the church to prepare itself. The Bible talks about lay aside every sin, lay aside every weight that so easily besets you, and run the race with patience. So we have to look to Jesus. You're looking unto Jesus, which is the author and finisher of our faith. So we have to keep our eyes on Christ, and not not worry about, where did the virus come from? Did it come from a laboratory? I mean, there's just so many videos out there now, and so people are sending so many of us videos and about vaccines and about viruses, where did the virus come from and all of that stuff. And we can't really get wrapped up into that. We really need to be laser focused in terms of getting closer to God. So what I kind of focus on and what I kind of live when it comes to life is, I call them the 4F. Okay, so we've got 4Fs. We've got faith, got family, we've got fitness, and then you have finances. Now, I have a lot of knowledge about finances, not about the other three. And what I mean by that is they're experts in those other areas too. So, so starting with faith, we kind of know what that is. It's your spiritual health, is getting closer to God. It's leaning upon Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and your Master. And so this is a time where we need to, like I was saying before, spend more time in prayer, spend more time in fasting. One thing I noticed was that in the Bible, when persecution arose, when hard times came, the apostles and the disciples, it's like that's when they became more in their faith. When times were tough, they didn't have large bank accounts. They didn't have their jobs to depend on. They only had God. So so we need to really focus on our spirit man, getting our spirit man in top physical condition, because we're going to need to be strong spiritually for other people. We're going to have to. The things I like what Pastor did was institute the prayer chain. So where we pick a slot to pray, and that's really helped me, because I actually, obviously I'm praying more because I have an obligation now. People are depending on me to pray in my prayer slot, so that we can keep the chain going. And so, but it's allowed me to spend 3 extra hours a week in prayer, when otherwise I may not have done that. So, but if it wasn't for the situation we're in, we may not have the opportunity. So the first part is faith, just increasing your spiritual hunger for God. So I'm going to let Pastor, that's his area. So he's gonna get us. I think the other area, like I mentioned, is family. Is important. Family and friends, health. So, like I was saying earlier, we need to stay close to our family, especially our older relatives and friends. And again, we're just in this time where everybody's reaching out to each other. Everybody is, I think, really, people are understanding that life is short. Let me check on mom and grandma, aunt and uncle, and you never know. We could end up in a time where we have to take something.
Wings checking the thing.
What was that? Oh, I don't know if that was a question or not, but yeah, make sure you're on mute unless you have a question. So, okay, so anyway, I'm going to keep going, but yeah, so family is important, family and friends. So what I was trying to say is that make sure that you're in a position, because you may have to take in a relative, like an older relative may have to move in with if times get tough in the future, and but you want to be in a financial position where you can help out if you have to. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes too. And then I think also what's important is physical health is important too. And again, this is not my area of expertise. I know we got people like Pedro, who's I think a personal trainer. So you can defer to him. But I think, understanding where you are physically is important too. Getting all of your vital signs in place, your blood pressure, cholesterol, getting all of those numbers in line as much as you can. Because sometimes I think about, what if we had a crisis and you had to move, you had to, you had to move, you had to run, you had to get out of a building. There was an emergency. You got to be in some shape where if you have to carry something. So I've been thinking about that a lot too. Just being healthy physically. Just like with this virus, we all know that those who are more vulnerable, who have pre-existing conditions, and especially in the Black community. So we need to focus. So that's family, faith, family, fitness, and last is finances. So this is where I'm going to spend obviously most of my time is talking about finances and like I said, if you have any questions or comments, let me know, or just mute yourself and pipe in. But I wanted to look at Matthew 24 verse 8.
Oh my God.
24 verse 8. 24. Okay, so Matthew 24, we kind of know that Matthew 24 is a chapter where Jesus talks about the last days. He talks about signs that are going to precede his coming, his second coming, his arrival. And so, he talks about, so I'm going to start at verse 6. It says, "And ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there should be famines, pestilences," which is, this virus is a pestilence, "and earthquakes in divers or different places." And he said, "These are the beginning of sorrows." And some people may say, well, we've always had viruses. We've always had earthquakes. We've always had wars. So what makes this time special? Somebody might say, hey, I'm 50 years old. I've been hearing about the last days ever since I was little. Or I've been hearing about Jesus coming ever since I was little. Well, what's different is verse 8, where it says, "All these are the beginning of sorrows." So that word sorrows in different versions, you look at maybe the Amplified and other versions of the Bible, that word beginning of sorrows is also labor pains, beginning of labor pains. Now, some of you sisters might help me out, but if you have, if you're pregnant and you have a contraction, normally if you have your first contraction and you call your doctor, I didn't hear that. Okay. So again, if you're not asking a question, please put yourself on mute. But if you're pregnant and you had your very first contraction, normally you do not go to the hospital. If you call your doctor, say, "Hey, I have a contraction," I think that's what it was. They probably aren't going to tell you to go to the hospital. What eventually they're going to ask you is, how far apart are your contractions? We know that the more contractions you have, the more closer they are, certain number of minutes apart, that tells you how soon the baby is coming. So this labor pains really means that we're going to see these wars, rumors of wars, pestilences. We're going to see that happening in more severity and in more often, more frequent. So if you are on the line here and if you're over 40, you probably grew up in the 70s and 80s. Back then there were things that were happening in the world, but they weren't as I want to say as intense as what we've seen. And I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about how over the last 20 years, since 2000, we had Y2K, we had the tech bubble burst, and we had a recession. We had 9/11 happen. We had war with Iraq, which kind of really wasn't a war, but that's what they said it was. And then we had financial crisis in 2008, which is a worldwide event. Then we have this pandemic, which is a worldwide event, and economies around the world just shut down. So we're actually seeing more crises, and they're happening more frequently, and they're happening with more intensity. And that's that labor pain. So that lets us know that things are falling in place. And really what they're falling in place for, they're falling in place for the entrance of a of a one world government that's foretold in the book of Revelation. So what happens is people are going to voluntarily give up their rights. Countries are going to give up their constitutions. The leaders of the world are going to come together and formulate a one world government. And there's going to be a small minority of people who protest, who try to stop it. But the majority of people are going to accept it because they're going to be living in fear. And fear will cause you not to think clearly. You're more liable to make a mistake when you act out of fear. And that's why the Bible always tells us, fear not. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. And so, love casts out fear, because fear has torment. So God is always encouraging us not to be afraid. And even Jesus in this Matthew chapter 24, he kind of told us not to be afraid. And so, so God does not want us to be afraid of all of this. But it's the beginning of labor pains. It's the beginning of sorrows. So my first advice in terms of what we should be doing financially is, one is getting out of debt. So again, if you've heard me talk about finances and things like that, I've talked a lot about getting out of debt because you want to disengage from the world's financial system. The world's financial system is on debt. We're just all over the world. We're a debt-based society. Individuals, corporations, governments live beyond their means, borrow, and to fund their operations. And we have to understand that. We have to understand that the world runs on debt. And so you don't want to be a slave to it. We all heard the verse in Proverbs that the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So you don't want to always be a borrower serving the lender. And because the house you have, the car you have, really isn't yours if you have debt tied to it. A mortgage, you got a mortgage. If you've got a car loan, a bunch of credit cards, a lot of student loan debt, that those assets don't belong to you because you haven't paid off that debt. So again, we don't want to be dependent upon the world's financial system. And the reason why is that our government is really a bad example for us, because right now government debt is $24 trillion. And a lot of people have no concept of what 1 trillion is. We've heard of millions, we've heard of billions, but 1,000 billion is a trillion, and so it's an astronomical number. It is $1 trillion. You can go online and you can kind of look up statistics on what's a trillion. Like, I think I saw statistics that said if you stacked $100 bills, $1 trillion could stretch from the earth to the moon, or earth to the sun, or something like that. Or if you had if you spent $1 million a day from the time of Christ until now, you still would not have spent $1 trillion. So you see different statistics about that, how much is a trillion. But so we're, as a nation, 24 trillion in debt. So we'll never, as a country, pay that off. That will never get paid off. And so, and the reason why our country really hasn't gone bankrupt is because interest rates have been so low. So you've seen interest rates on your credit cards, on your checking and savings, on your certificates at the bank. I mean, we haven't seen interest rates this low ever. And so what's happening is every time we have a crisis, like a financial crisis, this pandemic, the government steps in and tries to prevent the economy from going into a depression. And so how they do that is they just either print money or borrow money. And so all of these checks that we've been getting in the mail from the government, we say, oh, wow, this is nice. But where does this money come from? This package that they put together is called the CARES Act. It's a $2 trillion package. And, so where do they get $2 trillion from? Is that they're not raising our taxes, right? Because we're in a bad economy. They're not cutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and defense spending, so to get the money. So the way the government gets the money is they just print it. They just print it just like you would print things off your printer at home. That's where the government gets the money. They just print it. And so, but what that does is it causes problems down the road. And so our nation's government's debt is just increasing. And what was going to happen is at some point, interest rates, which are really low, are going to start going back up. And the government is not going to be able to pay its interest on its debt. Technically, if you can't pay interest on your debt, you default. It's just almost like, if a person is no longer able to pay their mortgage or, pay their credit card bill, I mean, you default. So when that happens, we're going to see a reset. So I'll talk about that later. But so government debt, 24 trillion, student loan debt is 1.6 trillion, highest it's ever been. And like I said, every time we have a crisis, the government comes in, pumps in a lot of money. But after the financial crisis in 2008, so many people had lost their jobs that what they had to do is everybody went back to school and try to learn a new skill, new trade, so they can go in a different field or keep their job. And so now those student loans and the cost of college keeps going up. So the student loans are 1.6 trillion. So you've got a lot of college kids who are graduating. The jobs that they're getting don't pay enough to cover all the debt. Some people are graduating with $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 of student loan debt, and their jobs are just not paying enough to cover all of that debt. The bad thing about student loan debt, you can't file for bankruptcy. You can't get rid of it through bankruptcy. So, and there's about 3 million people in the United States who are over the age of 60 who have student loan debt. And if you don't pay it, the government can garnish your Social Security check and to get their money for student loans. So student loans are debts that, you know, you definitely want to get those paid off ASAP. And then right now, outstanding credit card debt is $1.1 trillion. So, so these are some huge numbers. You know, student loan debt, credit card debt are huge. You know, how do you get out of debt? First thing is you have to change your thought process. You have to change. You have to really expand and be creative. Like sometimes when we want to buy something, we do like either or, where if I want something, we instantly pull out the plastic and charge it. But you know, you have to, before you do that, ask yourself, how do I what is my plan to pay this off? So before I put something on my credit card, what is my plan to pay it off? And am I going to be able to have this paid off in a month, 2 months, instead of just charging it and then just playing it by ear? I think the other thing when it comes to credit cards is you know, like I said, it's you know, figuring out a way to pay something off, but then also understanding that when you go into debt, you're committing your future income. You're making an assumption that I'm going to be making money in the future, and this item that I'm buying, whether it be furniture for your house, a car, a house, or whatever it is, you're assuming that you're not going to lose your job, you're not going to get a cut in pay, you're not going to get laid off. And so, you know, we buy things making an assumption on our future income. And so not everything is guaranteed. So again, we got to be careful about how we utilize our debt and how we think about it, how we think about debt. You know, debt cannot be something that we just go to, you know, as a default. It is a lot of it too is a little trickery, you know, by the world, you know, the world's financial system. I remember a time where if you wanted to buy a car, they would advertise a car on TV and they would tell you how much the car costs. This car costs $20,000. But then I started noticing that they stopped telling you how much the car costs and just told you what the lease payment is. So they would say, well-qualified buyers can get this truck for $200 a month. And now you're switching, thinking about just, oh, I can afford $200 a month. And so you come with a little bit of money up front and you're driving this nice shiny vehicle. But the finance companies get very creative in you know, being able to provide you money, even if you have a bruised credit, no credit, bad credit. Car dealers, they don't care. But what they don't tell you is they don't tell you how much interest you're going to be paying. So if you got bruised credit, they're not going to tell you that, oh, car loan rates are at 3%, but you're going to be paying 6%, or you're going to be paying 8% because of your credit. So we got to be aware of, you know, a lot of these things that we hear on the radio, just to get us in debt. So, so it looks like Brandon has a question. Why are student loans the only thing you can't file for bankruptcy for? What makes that loan different? You know, the difference is that the loan comes from the government, and that's just the rules. You know, aside from that, that's the only thing that makes the student loan debt different, is that it's just, you know, it's issued by the government, and you know, and I guess, you know, if you file for bankruptcy, you know, they can't, that's why the government came out with some of these programs that if you graduate from college and then you go to, you go work in the public sector, like you're a teacher or like a police officer or a firefighter or something like that. If you work in public service, then after 10 years of paying on your student loans, if they're still not paid off, they will forgive you. But that program has a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. Very little people have gotten their student loans forgiven. So yeah, so that's the only thing I know about that, is that, you know, the loans are issued directly from the government, and they don't let you get rid of them through bankruptcy. So so when it comes to paying off debt, the thing to do is just obviously stop adding to debt. The way you do that is Dave Ramsey, who a lot of you probably have heard of. He has what he calls the baby steps, and one of his baby steps is first step is just to save up $1,000. So do what you can. If you got to eat beans and rice, you know, whatever you need to do, just save up $1,000. And put that aside. Then what you do is start attacking your debt. So you have to list your debt, you know, what the debt is, how much you owe, what do you normally pay on it, the interest rate, and then do a debt snowball. So a debt snowball is where you pay the minimum on all your debts except for one. So if you have a credit card, they're charging you 25% interest. You really want to get rid of that. Then you pay the minimum on your other credit cards or your other debt, and just try to put as much as you can on that credit card. And then you can try to, you know, wipe that out. And then whatever you were paying on that one credit card, you put on the next one. And then when that gets paid off, you take that chunk of money, put it on the next one. So so that's basically, you know, what we have to do. Now there's a question that says, I'm just looking at your questions here. Let's see. It says, what do we do as believers to prepare ourselves for the immediate future? No job or no savings or no backup plan. So, well, I would say the first thing is you have to go into triage. I call it triage mode. You know, it's like emergency room. You know, when you go into emergency room, they're just trying to do whatever they got to do to keep you alive, right? Or to fix the immediate problem. So you have to look around and you have to say, if I don't have a job, what can I do to, what can I do? You know, can I find a part-time job? Do I have something around the house that I can sell? You know, I can put on eBay, put on Craigslist to get some money. You know, just another thing you want to do is maybe ask around. So ask relatives, friends, if they know about any job openings. I mean, it's a bad economy now. You know, nobody's really hiring. A lot of people are unemployed. Again, take advantage of right now with this new legislation that came out. You can actually get additional unemployment benefits. So normal unemployment, I think, is like $360 a week, and there's an additional $600 a week that you can get. So with this CARES Act, you can get up to $900 a week of unemployment benefits, which until July. So number one is look at that CARES Act. You know, do some research into how you can tap into the maximum amount of unemployment benefits. Number two is just try to look around and say, hey, what do I have in my hand? How can I generate income? Do I have a hobby? Do I have a skill? Is there something that I can do that I can generate income from? And like I said, if there's anything you got around the house that you can sell and get rid of. And then if you have debt, work with your creditors, call your creditors, say, hey, look, I'm not working right now. You know, right now, everybody's very sensitive. The creditors, your landlord. Everybody knows that a lot of people aren't working, that the economy is shut down. So just to answer your question real quickly, I would do some of those things, and then I would sit down like you had no backup plan. Now is the time to kind of create some type of emergency plan to say, okay, what lessons have I learned, and can I make sure this doesn't happen again? But but right now this is emergency time, so it's time to try to maximize the unemployment benefits and try to reduce your expenses as much as you can, and try to see what can you do when those unemployment benefits run out to supplement that income. Someone else wrote, is a lease considered a debt? And a lease, no, a lease is just a payment. So you don't have a loan that you owe. It's not considered a debt. But if you lease a car, if you do have to be careful on how much you're paying for the lease, because the higher your lease is, then obviously that's less money you have to save. You got to watch out, because you can buy nicer cars if you lease them, because you're not financing a loan. So I think people tend to overspend when they lease, but a lease is not considered a debt; it's considered an expense. Someone asked, when should you start buying silver and gold? So, like I was saying before, if you are comfortable with how much you have in cash, if you have a proper 3 to 6 months of cash reserve in the bank for emergencies, if you have your debts down, your credit cards, your car loans, your student loans, if those are at a minimum, then and if you're saving for retirement like you're supposed to, saving for college, then it would be okay with buying silver and gold. So I was going to talk about that. So I was going to talk about getting a safe. So I would encourage people to get a safe. Maybe put some maybe $200, $300, $400, $500 in that safe, because just in case the bank is closed, the ATM is closed. I don't know, some of you might remember a long time ago, we had a blackout back in like 2003 or 2004 with the whole East Coast. There was no electricity. So you want to get a safe, you want to put some money in the safe. You can buy small grams of gold and silver, in the safe. So just like times like now, when the market crashes, people tend to flock to gold prices go up. So, but it's a diversification. Don't look at gold and silver as an investment. It's not an investment. It doesn't earn interest, doesn't pay dividends, it's just a hedge against inflation, against rising prices. There's another question. What should you do with credit cards that you don't use? Do you close them? You want to first pull your credit report. So you go to annualcreditreport.com. And what happens with your credit report is that you have to be careful, because if those credit cards you've had a long time, if you start closing those accounts, it's going to shorten your credit history, and that's not going to look too favorable in relation to your creditors. So if you have some older cards that you don't use, you may just want to keep them. Now, if you're paying some really high annual fees, you may want to look at that in terms of cutting them up. But I would just be careful with the credit cards you've had a long time, and just look more closely at your credit report as to what type of damage it could do to your credit. So that's what I would say with that. Let me look at some other questions here. It says, what should you do with money that you save at home because you don't trust the banks? The only thing you can do is put it in a safe. If you all financial institutions are similar. I mean, if you take that money that you have at home, it depends on how much it is. You know, you could put it, you know, in some type of investment. But if you have money, you don't trust the banks, you know, you could put that money in a safe. And let's see. And then the other question was, yeah, even though it doesn't build interest, doesn't silver and gold still gain value? Yeah, it gains value in the sense that gold and silver are considered a worldwide currency. It's accepted all over the world. And like I said, it's a hedge against inflation. So as the price of goods and services increase, the gold generally goes up too. It's just that gold is not considered a financial asset. It's considered what we call a real asset, you know, like land, you know, gold, silver, precious metals. So gold and silver goes up when usually when there's a crisis. So that's why I say you kind of use it as a hedge. But yeah, gold has risen in value over time, especially the more money the government prints, that tends to help gold gain in value. So, so a couple other points that I wanted to make is that we want to also, you know, build your cash reserve 3 to 6 months of income. And now, when the economy kind of collapses, okay, when the economy collapses, so some people want to think about, like, what does that mean? Okay, like I was mentioning before, our economy is based on debt. Okay, and so just like a person who spends more money than they make, and after a while, if you spend more money than you make and your credit cards pile up, you're going to get to a point where you can't pay those credit cards every month, and then you may have to file for bankruptcy. Usually, how that happens is something outside of your control happens. That is, you lose your job, you have a cut in pay, you have an injury or illness and you can't work, so your pay gets cut. And so you file for bankruptcy. And so what happens then is that's kind of where our government is headed. So our government, like I mentioned, is $24 trillion in debt. You know, Social Security is not fully funded. Medicare is not fully funded, although our population is getting older. So there's going to be more and more demands on the Social Security system. So there's going to come a time where the government can't pay off its debt. And we'll probably have what I would call a reset. And the reset just basically means that the government may come out and say, you can no longer pay for items with paper dollars. They may say for every paper dollar you have, every paper dollar that you have is going to be converted into some type of digital currency, like, you know, Bitcoin. So I've seen articles where governments around the world are looking at how to establish a cashless society. How do we get cash out of people's hands and have everybody using a digital currency, using, you know, like your chip in your credit cards, or ultimately something on your body, you know, or in your body that can identify you, that you can use to pay for goods and services. So, so someone asked, should we invest in things that we know are coming, like 5G, Bitcoin, even though we know that they may be part of the one world government? That's hard to say, because what happens is when things reset, okay, and when things are at a point where you can't buy and sell without a chip or without the mark on you, your money, it may not be worth anything. So even if you say, hey, I'm going to buy stock in Verizon or buy stock in a telecommunications company because they're building out their 5G network, that might make you some money. And but in the end, if the dollar goes away, if the currency goes away, then, or if you can't even buy, you can't even take the money you made and buy anything because you don't have the chip or the mark, that might not mean a lot, at that time. But, between now and then, it could make sense to do that. I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin because the price of Bitcoin just fluctuates so much. The other problem is that a government can shut down cryptocurrencies if they want to. And I've seen governments in other countries put limits and close cryptocurrencies. So, and because the federal government and bank and governments around the world don't want to be locked out of this digital currency, they want to control it and they make the laws. So I would rather see someone, save up, build up their cash reserve, pay off debt, keep it simple, and maybe just buy some large cap mutual funds, save into your 401k right now, and just stay diversified. Don't put too much faith, in Bitcoin and 5G and things like that. Someone asked, where can you purchase gold from? So there are websites, and I'll have to look them up and maybe get a list to Pastor, but where you can buy small grams of gold. So you don't have to buy big gold bars or anything like that. But there are a couple of different places where you can buy gold. You can have it shipped to you. You can put it in your safe, and you can buy smaller grams of gold. And these are reliable gold dealers. There was a dealer that I was familiar with. I don't know if he retired or not, but his name is Tom Cloud. And I bought some gold from him. This was probably 10 years ago. And he was a Christian gold dealer, and he could, purchase gold. So sometimes you can go to like a gold dealer or broker and purchase precious metals too. But I'll have to get that information to Pastor. So one point so you can buy gold coins, but I just saw that pop up. Sometimes you have to be careful though, because sometimes gold coins are more of like collector's items. Like you see on TV where you could buy a set of silver coins and there are certain mint or certain, there are certain class of coins. Sometimes those types of coins may not always hold their value. So you might be better off getting like gold bars or gold, grams of gold. So one of the things so now talking more spiritually, as a church, when we talk about the last days, okay, and I'm going to kind of move on for the sake of time, but when we talk about the last days, some people in the church are kind of sitting back, hanging out, and they're saying, well, they believe in what we call the pre-trib rapture, meaning that before anything happens, we're going to be out of here. Jesus is going to come in the clouds with the voice of the archangel and the trumpet sounds, and the dead in Christ rise first, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. So some people are kind of, I think, a little bit complacent and kind of thinking, well, before things get too bad, I can just kind of float along until the rapture happens. But we don't want to depend on that, because a lot of bad things could happen right before the rapture. And, maybe the Antichrist isn't revealed yet, but just like this pandemic has caught a lot of people off guard. So we need to be ready for Jesus' coming spiritually, but naturally, we need to be prepared just in case there's a delay in his coming. So, so when you read some of the parables, you know, like the parable of the pounds, the landowner delivered the pounds to his servants, and he said, "Occupy till I come." So, so the Lord wants us busy getting the gospel out and being productive until he comes, but being spiritually ready. So the reason I said that is because if an economic collapse happens, if our country does a reset, if the country says, okay, your paper money is worthless, we're using digital currency, or even if they say, you got to get this mark, you got to get this whatever before you can buy and sell, we may have to barter. Okay, so we may have to form a network between churches where we have pantries, and you know, if I need paper towel and you need some sugar, we can barter. And that might be the point that we get to. This could happen before, you know, before the rapture. So there are websites and there are videos on how to build your pantry, how to survive if there was 3 months without electricity or without you know, water, or let's say our water supply gets tainted. Let's say we have again another electrical a cyber attack, or you know, an attack on our infrastructure by a foreign country or terrorists. You know, we can survive without electricity. And so I'm going to tell you about a website you can go to see a video that helps you prepare a pantry. So also too, when it comes to your investments, you want to diversify your investments, like I was saying earlier. I don't think this is a time where we have to like abandon you know, our retirement plans at work and just go totally buy gold and silver and all of that. But I do think just staying diversified, understanding your risk tolerance. You know, if you're a naturally aggressive person, if you're aggressive in your investments, okay, then you can have an aggressive portfolio. If you're conservative, then be conservative. You know, be who you are, understand your risk tolerance, and just diversify your investments. So you have, you know, stocks in your investments, bonds, some cash. And then if you're able to, you know, you can buy some grams of gold, keep it in your safe. You could even buy some foreign currency like some Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, or maybe Swiss franc or something like that, you know, put it in your safe. So I'm the type of person that, you know, there isn't any one stock or any one investment you should just pour all your money into right now, because we just don't know exactly, you know, what the next 5 or 10 years are gonna hold. The other thing I was going to mention is the fact that you know, one day, like I mentioned, you know, the things can't go on as they've been going on. So, you know, we may have, like I mentioned, a collapse in the dollar, a reset to a digital currency. But even in the book of Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 and 6 talk about a time of inflation where a day's wages only buys a small amount of food or a loaf of bread. Right now, it's hard to see that because everything is so at a standstill. You know, you go to the gas station, you're spending $1.20, $1.25 for gas. Gas prices are so low, but there is going to come a time where we're going to have a lot of inflation. And inflation just is a rise in prices, and it's going to take more money to actually buy the things that you used to buy. And the Bible is talking about a day where, you know, you work a whole day, like 8 hours a day, and you can only buy a small amount of food. So, and there's going to be civil unrest, you know, like we see people even now who march to Lansing, state capitals around the country, saying, "Hey, open up the states up." So we're going to see more civil unrest. Our country is becoming very divided on race, divided on gender, class, like rich versus poor. We've seen demonstrations, where people want minimum wage increase because they can't live on minimum wage. So we're seeing a lot of civil unrest, a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. And this goes back to my first point, is getting our house in order, keeping our lamps burning bright, making sure we have our security in the Lord as everything else is kind of falling apart. So, I mentioned that Christians don't need to be afraid because God will keep us out of the great tribulation. But again, we don't want to be lazy and think that the rapture will bail us out. So we want to continue to spread the gospel, occupy until he comes. And I would encourage people to study the parables in the Bible. So there's a parable of the expectant steward in Luke 12:39. There's a parable of the pounds that I mentioned in Luke 19:11. There's a parable of the two builders. One person built their house on sand, one built on the rock. That's in Matthew 7:24. Parables of the 10 virgins. That's a really good parable. You had the 10 wise virgins, the 10 foolish virgins, and the wise virgins had extra oil in their lamps because the bridegroom was delayed in his coming. And then the foolish virgins, their lamps burned out. So they told the wise virgins, "Hey, give us some of your oil." And the wise virgins said, "No, we don't have enough oil for you because in case our lamps burn out, we need extra oil." And so while the foolish virgins were out getting oil, the bridegroom came and then they were shut out. So that's a really good parable. And then you have the parable of the talents. And like I said, study Matthew 24, study the book of Revelation, so that you can be ready. You can be ready for the times that we're living. It's not a time to be, like I've heard somebody say, not a time to be scared, but a time to be prepared. It's an exciting time because we see Bible prophecy coming to pass, and we see opportunities to spread the gospel, because the more fear people have, the more they're going to be open to listening to the gospel and wanting to get their hearts right. Like I was saying before, for unbelievers, there's going to be the one world government, one world currency, one world religion. The governments of the world aren't going to have to force people, to take the mark. People are actually going to gladly take the mark. There are people who are getting things injected in them right now. They're getting little chips injected in their hands, in their back, because the government is saying, "Hey, we need to, if you're in an accident, you're passed out, we can scan your hand and get all your medical information." So, these things like what's happening now, the pandemic, people are afraid. So people are, again, willing to give up their rights. But God has, the beautiful thing about God is that he has told us the story. We know the end. We know how things are going to happen. And so we don't have to be caught off guard. We don't have a God that just left us in the dark. And so that's what I love about God. So ultimately, our money will not save us. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't save, we shouldn't invest, we shouldn't prepare for the future. But we should have a mindset that I need to get out of debt. I just need to be disconnected from the world's financial system. That doesn't mean that you quit your job or anything. You work, you use common sense, you save, but you just have to be prepared for, like I read the verse in the beginning, know how to live when times are good, learn how to live when times are bad. Because one of the things I thought about was the disciples, okay? So the disciples, after Jesus died and was resurrected, they lived by faith. They didn't really have a lot of money, a lot of material possessions to live on. When you read those first few chapters of Acts, they just went house to house, broke bread. They were happy. They shared everything, between themselves. They kind of were doing the bartering. They were selling land and things that they had, bringing those monies to the apostles so that it could be distributed among everybody. And so I think that ideally that's how God wants the church to operate. There shouldn't be anybody in need. There shouldn't be anybody without. We should be freely giving and helping each other out. And I think it's going to come a time where we're going to be forced to do that. Peter in the Bible, when they went to the temple, and Peter him and John were walking up, and then the man who was paralyzed, he was looking for them to give him some money. And what did Peter say? He said, "Silver and gold have I none," right? He said, what you need is not money, you need Christ. So he didn't have any money to give him, but he gave him Christ. He gave him, pray for him. He was healed. So now the guy could go out and he could get a job and make his own money. So, that's kind of the point I want to make, is that in this day and time, you want to just be prepared for another crisis. Start preparing, as we get out of this crisis, start preparing for the next crisis. Start, like I said, getting your pantry together and start getting out of debt. Start, building your cash. Do whatever you can, even if you don't, go on a vacation, even if you don't, do all the extra things. You may have 1 or 2 years where you have to really sacrifice so that you can save some money. But we just have to know that God is going to see us through, and he has not abandoned us. Of course, he's with us always. And so, so that's what I want to leave you with. Someone asked a question about buying housing. I would probably say, now is probably a good time to look at real estate. I'm not an authority on real estate, but buying housing right now, you probably want to wait a little bit. Interest rates are not going anywhere, so interest rates are going to be low in terms of getting financing to get a house. But you've got a lot of people out of work, and you probably are going to start seeing more foreclosures, although the government, I believe, has told lenders not to foreclose on any homes for the next 3 or 6 months. So may not see a lot of foreclosures until later in the year. But yeah, you can, it's an asset, buying housing, if you want to use it as a rental property. But you got to look at what you're getting into too. I've seen a lot of people buy rental homes and just take losses, meaning that the rent that they receive is not enough to cover the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance on the house. So even though you have this house as an asset, it's like a money pit. And so I've seen that. So someone mentioned, the government is saying the virus may return in the fall, which is true. So we've seen the stock market hit a low, right, in March, and it's been climbing in the month of April. But the virus could come back. I think if it does, it's not going to be as serious because we'll be better equipped. And we could have, over the next couple of years, kind of waves where, smaller outbreaks will happen in communities around the country, but it won't be, like we're experiencing now. So it's going to take time for us to get out of this. It's definitely not going to be, right away. Tell us about the videos. Yeah. So there's a book that I recommend to everyone. It's called Master Your Money, and it's by someone named Ron Blue. So Blue. It's just he's a Christian financial author, and he basically gives good tips on every aspect of your finances. So it's called Master Your Money. Then there is a ministry that I subscribe to on YouTube, and the name of the ministry is called Truth, Truth, unedited. So Truth Unedited, that's one word, .com. And the guy who does it does a really good job with his videos. He's not standing up lecturing. It's not boring. He uses a lot of clips and a lot of animation. He talks a lot about the last days. He talks a lot about the collapse of the US dollar. But he has other things that he talks about from the Bible too. But he has a video called How to Prepare for the Coming World Collapse. So this is truthunedited.com. You can go to the YouTube channel and how to prepare for the coming world collapse. So talks about building a pantry. And now he talks about building a pantry for 6 months, being able to survive 6 months. So some of the things he encourages you to do, you may think like, man, I don't have that much money to buy that much water, but just get the concept of, let me just buy a little bit, extra money. Instead of buying one loaf of bread, let me buy two, and then, rotate your pantry. But, you got to start somewhere. So last question is, so thank you for whoever put that up there. So again, Master Your Money by Ron Blue and truthunedited.com. So someone asked, retire this year. I have no idea if you should retire this year. It depends on your, I guess it depends on your situation. If you feel that when you retire, you have enough money to live on for the rest of your life, if you feel confident in that, then I would say you could go ahead and retire. So even though the market has had a big drop, right now, stock market is down about maybe 15% this year. If you have done a good job of preparing for retirement, then this market drop should not have derailed you from your plan. So if you could feel confident, I can retire between my Social Security and my other income, I'm going to have enough money to last throughout my lifetime. I know the future is not guaranteed, or then you may continue with your retirement plans. But if you're not confident, you probably should not retire until you are 100% confident. So someone asked, what about entrepreneurship? So that's always good. It's always good to start businesses. A lot of opportunity now, with the internet, you can start, online businesses and things like that. So you just have to look at what you want to get into, what is the upfront cost, and how long would it take to recoup those costs. So, are you going to incur any debt to start a business? I always encourage people to, obviously keep your full-time job. You start your business in the evenings, on the weekends, and build your business until you get to the point where, you can quit your job. So, but I always advocate having another stream of income other than your job, because you just never know what happens with your regular job. So, so yes, entrepreneurship is always a good route, having your own business. So we're almost at 8 o'clock. So I hope you found some value in that. If you have any other questions, you can email me. So I'll give you my email. Email is my name, Damon, DAMON.R.DYAS ampf.com. So that is A as in Apple, P as in Paul. No, I'm sorry, it's AM. So it's A as in Apple, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, F as in Frank. So ampf.com. r.dias@ampf.com. So if you have any other questions, you can email me. And then we can go from there. So I'm going to give it over back to Pastor, and he can close us out.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, thanks, Damon. We appreciate it so very much. I want to let everybody know that, a lot of things that he said, you can investigate on your own. A lot of that information that he's given us, he's already done research on it, but there's information that validates what he's talking about. As a pastor, I want to ensure that for the most part, the members and those that know us and those that fellowship with us is prepared for what's coming. Like he said before, we don't know when Jesus is coming. We don't know the day, nor do we know the hour, but we do know the time, and we must prepare to live in the time in which we are actually in now. And if he doesn't come, be prepared to live in whatever time before he comes. And so I think we need to make sure that we adhere to that. I'm trying myself to try to get out of debt and all of that. Damien, if you can type your email address in the chat so everybody can get it. And I think we need to really, really buckle down, get out of debt, and begin to prepare ourselves for whatever comes. And we know the Lord is going to guide us, and he's going to lead us for those that actually are chasing after him and those that he loves. So I appreciate Damon, his expertise. He doesn't have to share that with us, but he does because, he loves the Lord and he loves us. And I appreciate him coming on and giving us information. And as time goes on, I'm quite sure he's going to come back and give us more information as he sees things change, so that we can be prepared from a financial standpoint in these areas. So I want to, if you have any more questions, please email him. The email is out there. Before we go off, those that, we ask that if you give, the information's out there for the giving on the chat. You can give through the push pay or the cash app. And so, one investment that I think is always good is giving to the kingdom. And it's not necessarily, just giving out in the name of the kingdom. So we want you to be prepared for in your giving. And so I'm going to pray and then let you guys go. And I know that you guys, keep that information. Now, this information also is out and has been recorded out on YouTube. There's been people out on YouTube, and we do have it on our YouTube channel, Consuming Fire Christian Center. And you can take a look at it there if you want to review any information that he talks about. All right. So we're going to pray, and we're going to let you go. Father, I just thank you for your grace, your mercy. I thank you, Father, for Damon, the man of God that you have brought to us tonight to give us instruction and to help us, Lord, navigate through this time. Lord, that your name will be glorified. And most of all, Father, that your people can be prepared in such a time as this. And Lord, allow us to preach the gospel. Allow us to be a light to a lost world, and allow your glory to shine through us, that those that are lost will see the light and they will come to you. I thank you for what you're doing and what you're about to do. And I give you glory, praise, and honor in Jesus' mighty name. All right. Well, God bless each and every one of you. And remember, email Damon all those questions so he can answer them back. And we thank God for each and every one of you. And we'll see you next week